Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Bible class, and I hope you remember on Sunday what we were talking about. We were talking about Jesus and his family, and he has brothers and sisters, and his mother and father as well. Of course, we mentioned that we don't really read about Joseph once he's grown. But the question that we asked, and I hope you still have written down in ink so you can't change it, did Jesus' brothers and sisters believe he was the Messiah or not? Yes or no? Did they believe? Yes. Did they not believe? No. So if you haven't already written that down, or if you lost it or whatever, write it down now. Yes, they believed, or no, they did not believe. And we will kind of get to that answer at the end of class today. So, how many of you have a photo album of your family? Maybe it's digital, maybe it's actually in a little book, I don't know. But how many of you have a photo album of your family? Maybe you have even a favorite picture of your family. And I might ask you, why is that your favorite picture? Good thing to remember and think about. You probably know your parents have probably got hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of you on their iPhones or their Android, whichever. They probably have a lot of pictures of you. And you could go back and scroll through those and see yourselves change even over time. So I think maybe take a moment with your family there and press pause, and I want you to discuss which one of these is your favorite picture and maybe why. And maybe share, if you want to, in the comments which one was your favorite and tell us why that one is your favorite. So take a minute, pause, and reminisce with your family. Something that I always think is interesting is to look at Facebook or Instagram or whatever. For me, it's Facebook. A lot of times we'll pop up and say, this was from 7 years ago today, or 2 years ago today. And it's always interesting to see those things from however many years ago on this date, because I don't always remember what I was doing 7 years ago on this date or what have you. And so it's interesting to see those pictures from so long ago back into the present. I think you probably saw the pictures from whenever Miss Megan and I were engaged recently. And I look at those and go, man, I have changed. And it's just kind of neat to see those. But in many events, I can always see God working through my life as those things happened. Now, during Bible times, 2,000 years ago, cameras weren't really a thing. And at the time, you know, in the 1600s, I believe, Rembrandt was painting, and he could paint great detail that looked so realistic. They didn't do that either back 2,000 years ago. So we don't really have pictures of people. Instead, they had stories, and they would have what we call oral tradition. In other words, it's spoken tradition. They would tell these stories, and you would remember things because they were told stories, and that was your pictures of things, was the stories. So we want to look back at the life of Jesus and use that as our pictures of Jesus, if you will, his photo album. So one of the things that I want to ask you one more time. Did his brothers and sisters believe in him or not? If you haven't already, write it down now. Yes, they believed. No, they didn't believe. And then we're going to look at this story from Mark chapter 3, verse 20 and 21. I'm just going to read it. It's very short. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. That's a lot of people. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. His family just said, he is out of his mind. Whenever I read this scripture, that huge crowd, there's so many people they can't even eat. That speaks a little bit about the well-known nature, almost the celebrity status that Jesus had at this time, where people knew so much that Jesus is someone who can perform miracles, who can teach, who does all these things, and they gather at this place so that they can't even eat. So many people knew who he was. They're crowding around and maybe want to see him do miracles, or perhaps want him to do miracles for them because they're sick or know somebody that's sick. Somehow his family finds out about it, and they come find Jesus wherever he is, and they're looking for him. They want to take charge of him. And at this point, they say he's out of his mind. It doesn't sound like they believe in him. They think he's crazy, or so it seems. Maybe they think, he needs to come back home to Nazareth. This is too much stress. He's under so much stress that he's losing it. We need to take him home to rest. I don't know. But the point is, they said he's out of his mind. Let's look at another story, and let's see what they think. This one comes from John. This is John chapter 7, verse 1 through 9. And I want you to take a minute, press pause, and I want you to read this story. We'll talk about it in a second, but go ahead and read John chapter 7, verse 1 through 9, and then we'll talk about it. Now, after reading that story, how many of you maybe think you want to change your answer on your card that you've written down, yes, they believed, or no, they didn't believe? Well, don't change it. If you remember, we wrote it in ink so that you can't change it. Keep it there. We're not done yet. We're going to keep reading. But as I think about it, verse 5 seems like a bit of a clincher, doesn't it? Verse 5, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. Doesn't sound like they believe. But again, let's keep reading. Don't change your answer. Let's see what happens. Because this clearly says they don't believe in him. More stories to come, though. Let's look at another one. This one comes from John chapter 19, and this is verse 25 through 27. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. That's 3 Marys there. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, usually whenever we're reading in John and it says the disciple whom Jesus loved, we understand that to be John. So he said to him, he said to her, woman, here is your son, the disciple Jesus loved. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple, John, took her into his home. Now I think that's an interesting account because it says that, John, I need you to take care of my mother, in short. So we always kind of wonder, well, why does he say that? Why doesn't he let his brothers and sisters take care of her? We're not really sure, but we do know, as we talked about on Sunday, we don't think that Joseph was still alive at this point, and it is very possible that Mary's not in good circumstances. Under the time, women living by themselves were hardly able to provide for themselves. That's why, if you read in the book of James, true religion is to look after widows and orphans in their distress. Widows didn't have a lot of provision. Men were the ones that could provide for their family under those times. So, Jesus is saying, John, take care of my mother. My dad is gone. She needs somebody. And it is believed, we don't really know this, it is believed that John, for some reason, was more financially stable than the others. And it is believed that for the next 15 years, John kept her until her death in his house. Again, tradition, we don't really have really accurate records of that, but that's the tradition, that's the belief. So, we know that John also was the oldest living apostle. He made it to live the longest and is the only one recorded to have actually died a natural death. So it kept Mary from having to endure the loss of another son, if you will, because John outlived her, whereas some of the others did not. So it's interesting that Jesus is saying, I need to take care of my family. My mother is, as he's dying in agony on the cross, he's still providing for his family. So let's look at one more story. This one comes from Luke, and this is in Luke chapter 24, which is the last chapter of Luke, verse 10 and 11. We'll start in verse 9. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. If you remember, one of Jesus' brothers is called James. And so we read here, Mary the mother of James. It doesn't say 100% certain, but it is quite possible that Mary the mother of James, since Jesus is now dead and actually raised from the dead at this point, Mary the mother of James might well be Mary who gave birth to Jesus also. So it's interesting to know that Mary may well have been one of the first to witness the empty tomb, the resurrection of Jesus, her son that she just saw die on the cross, now raised. I think that's a very interesting thing. So she finally gets confirmation of what she was told more than 30 years ago by the angel Gabriel. This will be the Messiah. He will save his people. You can look back in Luke chapter 1, 26 through 38 to read about that. So as we're bringing this to a close, I want to look at Acts chapter 1. And we're still wondering, did his brothers believe or not believe? Acts chapter 1, verse 12 through 14. Then the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the hill called the Mount of Olives, a Sabbath day's walk from the city. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room where they were staying. Those present were Peter, John, James, and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas, son of James. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. His brothers are present. But they didn't believe in Jesus. There's another in Galatians 1, 19 through 21. Paul is speaking about what he did after he saw Jesus on the road to Damascus and how he responded to that. And it says, I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brother. I assure you before God that I am writing you no lie. James, the Lord's brother, listed among the apostles. There's a book, the book of James. It is attributed to James, the brother of Jesus. Now, as you think about that, I think it's very interesting that James, the brother of Jesus, is listed as one of the other apostles, and he wrote one of the books of the Bible. Yet, in John chapter 7, verse 5, even his brothers did not believe in him. Interesting. I want to do an activity. There's going to be a picture that's going to come up on the screen in just a second, and I want you to stare at it, and I want you to stare at it right in the middle, and you'll hear some instructions while the picture's on the screen, and then keep staring once that picture changes. So, look at this picture, and then we'll keep talking. Stare right at the middle of this picture. There are 4 dots vertically, right in the middle. Keep your eyes on those and keep staring. We're going to be staring at this for about 45 seconds, and it's very important that you stare right at those dots. So just keep staring at it and looking intently right at those dots. Here in a little bit, this picture will change, and when it does, you need to stare at the exact same spot. So keep looking at those 4 dots. Focus your eyes right on those little dots and keep staring. It's about to change, and stare straight ahead. Now, what do you see? What did you see after the black and white picture was gone and you kept staring once the screen turned white? What did you see? I was able to see, it looks like a man with kind of long hair. The idea is it's supposed to look like Jesus. We don't have any idea what he actually looked like, but you get the idea. What I think is very interesting about that is that it illustrates a very simple point. Once that picture was gone, the one that it didn't really make any sense when it was in black and white, you could see very clearly what looks like Jesus maybe. But you couldn't see it until after it was gone. Whenever I think about that, I think it illustrates well what happened with Jesus' family. They were looking at Jesus in the flesh the whole time, and maybe he didn't look like they thought he should, or maybe he didn't do the things that they thought he was supposed to do, and they were confused and they didn't see it until he was gone. Once he was resurrected, once he was ascended, they were gathered with the apostles. They were there praying in that Acts chapter 1 passage we read. They believed after this. One of them would even write one of the books of the Bible. That is encouraging to me. It reminds me, really, of what I was talking about on Sunday about my brother. At the time, I didn't see my brother as anybody special. He was just my brother. But now, after the fact, looking back, and I see what he accomplished in the realm of basketball and the sport that he was playing, he was somebody special. But I didn't see it at the time. He was just my brother. But now I know differently. But it's after that is all done. So, let me ask you, how many of you still have your paper and got it right? Did they believe or did they not believe? How many of you think you got it right? Yes, they believed. Yes. No, they didn't believe. Well, let me tell you this. It was a trick question. So if you wrote no, they did not believe, you were right while he was alive. But after he was resurrected, now he lives forever. They did believe, so you were wrong after he was raised. Interesting. If you wrote yes, you were wrong while he was alive until he was resurrected and ascended, and then you were right. So it depends on when you were looking at Jesus in his life and whether or not his brothers and sisters believed in him. And this, to me, is a very important point. It means they changed their mind. And that is a very important thing for us to be able to do. It means that some people will hear the gospel and they will not believe. Or they will hear the gospel and at first they don't believe. And then they hear more and they change their mind and they start to believe that Jesus is the Christ. And through him, they can have salvation. That's very important for us to remember, that people can change their minds. You might be one of them. So as you look at Jesus, sometimes it takes him being gone for you to be able to see him for who he truly is and then believe in him. Hopefully that isn't what it takes for you, but maybe it is. You can change. You can follow Jesus. You don't have to stay away from him. And that, I think, is what makes Jesus' family what I would call heroes of the faith, because they changed their mind and they began to believe in Jesus. That's a good thing. So what I want for you to do, now that we've finished looking at the life of Jesus and we've kind of seen his family photo album, if you will, because all we have are these stories that are written down. We don't have pictures, we don't have paintings or anything like that of what they maybe had looked like. So we've seen this photo album of Jesus in his very short 33 years of life, and even then we only have really about 3 years very well recorded. So we know in his life he loved his family. We know that he provided for his mother. Even on the cross, he said, I need you to take care of my mother. And he loved his family. And you remember one of those stories, who is my mother and my brother and my sisters? the one who does the will of my Father. So who is part of Jesus' family? We didn't answer that question last time. The people that are in Jesus' family are those that do the will of God. And he loves his family. In fact, he loves everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter if you are a sinful person or a righteous person. Jesus loves you. And that is comforting to me. So, what I would like for you to do is to remember Jesus loves his family. He loves all of us. And that is why he went to the cross. He died so that all of us could go to heaven. We just have to accept that. So for an activity that you can do with your family, I want you to take a minute and go through, your photo album. Maybe you have to go through Facebook. Maybe it's saved on your phone or in the cloud. Go find some pictures of you and your family and maybe pick 4 or 5 of your favorites and write a little story that's kind of a reminder of what is happening in that picture. Why is that your favorite? And just spend some time looking at how your relationships with your own family have changed over time. As you get older, things change, and they're supposed to. So maybe write down a little bit of those things so that you remember these are not the same as they were that day. They have changed. Or just how you have changed as you have grown up. Because we all change as we grow up. I wasn't born 6 feet tall. I changed. So, thank you for coming and listening to Bible class today. I hope that you've learned a little bit about Jesus' family and how we can all change and learn to believe in Jesus and that we can go to heaven because of what he did for us. So, I'll see you on Sunday.